My name is Ian Rice. I've got two children here at the Caledonia School District. It's very apparent here by all of the parents that have spoken that this board and the school district is failing. More importantly, I came here to talk about critical race theory. This theory was never meant to be brought into grade schools, high schools, at all. It's actually taught in the collegiate atmosphere, and more importantly, the legal portion of the collegiate atmosphere, to see different laws through the lens of race, from an ethics and an ethical standpoint, right? Not for grade schools and high schoolers. The problem with bringing it to high school and grade school level is that we don't have the educators to properly teach these kids. Instead, they're using it as their own agenda to indoctrinate the kids to hate each other. And whether you believe that to be true or not, the reality is that's what's happening. Critical race theory is teaching that white people are bad. That's not true. That would teach my daughter that her mother is evil. You already have an educator within your staff that has pulled my daughter aside and said, well, you're a minority, so you know better than to engage in certain things.
Wow.
Whoa.
When I was brought to the school's attention, nothing happened to the educator. Instead, my daughter was brought in, and she was ridiculed. So my question is now, with critical race theory being brought in, what is your criteria to educate the educators? And who are you to educate my children, or any of our children, in life issues? That's our job.
Yes.
Your job is to teach them math and science. Our job is to teach them about life. I believe racial issues and tensions across the U.S. are nowhere near what they used to be decades ago. Do we have a long way to go? Sure. Do we still have individuals out there that need to be taught? Absolutely. But I believe the people here don't look at me as a black man. They look at me as a man standing in front of you addressing an issue that we all are very passionate about.
I definitely think that in the future, homeschooling is going to be illegal within the United States. By the way things are going, I, as an Eastern European person, am entirely sure that it's going to be made illegal because it was made illegal here while we were under a communist dictatorship. And this doesn't have anything to do with communism necessarily. Every single authoritarian regime wants control of the children. They want to be the ones that get to teach children what to think. This is what Lenin said. This is what Hitler said. It doesn't matter whether it's radical Islamic theocracy. It doesn't matter if it's communism. It doesn't matter if it's Nazi Germany. And the reason for this is quite simple. You see, if you were to go to the dictator and you would say, you know what, I will never join your side, then the dictator will just say, doesn't matter, you don't want to join our side. We already own your children. They already believe in our ideology. They're going to grow up in our ideology. You're almost old and you're going to die anyway. So just keep quiet. Don't create much of a fuss. Because if you do, we're going to punish you. And this is why instinctively a lot of parents are against critical race theory, even though they don't understand what CRT is, even though they can't articulate what it is, because apparently CRT is like this Schrödinger ideology. You know, for some people it's just like, well, it teaches you how not to be a racist. For other people, it's dismantling capitalism. Like, for example, here you get to see that they're going to provide an already created in-depth study that critiques empire, white supremacy, anti-blackness, anti-indigeneity, racism, patriarchy, cis-heteropatriarchy, capitalism, ableism, and anthropocentrism, and other forms of power and oppression. So in other words, like at a school where you have the teacher and you have the student and it's clear position of power, they're going to criticize systems of power. And not only that, they're going to also push a fake idea of history, which is the 1619 Project, which claims that the reason the US got separated from Britain and had the Civil War is because they realized that Britain wants to abolish slavery. I don't even think like at the time they were discussing this in Britain. I don't even think the movement to abolish slavery existed in Britain by 1619. Most historians disagree with it. But not only that, I think someone should tell the British woke activists about the fact that Britain ended slavery because they constantly disagree with this. Well, how can you believe the 1619 Project existed and at the same time believe that Britain didn't try to end slavery? Very interesting. Now, here's the funny part. A lot of parents, again, they can't articulate what CRT is, but they do see the negative effects. They do see what kids are bringing home for school. I'll probably make another video in reading you some of that literature. And they also see the fact that in certain schools, apparently, they are making blacklists. And the blacklists happen to be what parents think negatively about certain issues. And then they use activism in order to try to get the parents fired. I mean, this was an article that I read a long time ago on my channel about an elite private school where one of the children told the parent not to speak with another parent because that might get him in trouble and that might affect his future. You get to see like this reverse, this unnatural order where the child get to lecture the parent. It's something that actually happened in Nazi Germany as well as during Mao's revolution in China. These revolutionary ideologies that have the children lecturing the adults. Because usually it's the adult that will say to the child, hey, don't speak with that other kid because he's bad news. But now you get to see the kid telling the parents, like, hey, don't speak with this other parent because you're going to get me into trouble, Dad. Can you be a little bit more woke, Grandpa? Can you be a little more aware of with whom you're associating? So, because of this, in some states in the US, they banned CRT from being taught in schools, which is kind of funny. A small parenthesis. If you're unaware, like this conversation was happening on Twitter since 2 months ago. And every single leftist that I know was like, CRT is not being taught in schools. Stop the nonsense. Stop the misinformation. CRT is not being taught in schools. And I'm like, why do they care so much, really? I mean, if it's not being taught and people want to ban it, why the fuck do you care? Like, right? But the reason they cared is because they knew eventually it's going to get taught. But now that it's being get taught, like luckily some people fell down the slippery slope and pushed for legislation before it got taught. Right? The same way you can't teach religion in schools, some people say that you shouldn't teach this thing in school, which is pretty much like a civic religion at this point.
Racism, anti-blackness, or violence. I will use my voice in the most uplifting way possible. And do everything in my power to educate my community. I will love my black neighbors the same as my white ones.
And what's funny is that once censorship happened, like the same leftists that are pro-censorship, they're pro-deplatforming, they're pro-blacklisting, all of a sudden they're for free speech. Maybe this is why censorship needs to happen. If it gets people to be on the side of free speech, more people should be censored. So they're saying, even if this censorship is legal in the narrow context of public primary and secondary education, it is antithetical to educating students in the culture of America free expression. It is a violation of this commonly shared vision of America as a nation of free, vigorous, and open debate to resort to the apparatus of government to shut it down. What open debate do you have in primary schools exactly? What open debate can you even have? Like, if the teacher tells you 2 + 2 = 4, can you debate it with the teacher? I mean, maybe you can debate it on 2 + 2 = 4, but can you debate it on critical race theory, do you think? You know, like this is the bizarre thing. Like, no, especially primary schools, they are hellholes. I've been to one. Most horrible experience of my life. But you don't get to debate. Like, the teacher comes in, they teach you what they have to teach, and you need to be quiet and learn, and then reproduce it to the teacher. Otherwise, you fail. You get a bad grade. There is no debate in primary schools. Get the fuck out. Like, well, not to mention, like, what exactly is a grown-ass teacher going to debate with children? Maybe it can happen in certain contexts, but it's not going to happen, you know, like, at large. Especially about politics. And it's also kind of weird that I went through school and I had no idea what my teachers voted for. Like, I literally had no idea what politics my teachers had and how they feel about certain things. Like, when I went to school, I learned about math, Romanian, English, you know, like the things that were skills in life so I can get a higher education. I didn't learn about how the world works. You know, I had these weird things called parents that get to taught me these things. I managed to get through school without learning about sex education, by the way. Like, nothing sexual was taught to me in schools. My parents did that. Astonishing, I know. It's like, I'm really curious if these teachers even think that the parents have a role in educating their children. Or is it that, no, it's their job to educate, and the parents should just hurry up and go away, so that the teachers can have a much more stronger role in educating. And by the way, just to explain to you why this is not censorship, there's nothing stopping these people from doing this in private. There's nothing stopping these teachers from doing it off hours by talking with the parents who want their kids to learn this stuff and sending them voluntarily. There's nothing stopping them from doing it on social media. There's nothing stopping them from doing it anywhere else, just not during hours. But that's not what they want. Like, what they want is for this to be paid by the taxpayer money. They want the kids to be forced to listen, and they want the kids to not be able to speak back, and they want the kids to have to learn this or else they get a bad grade. And if you're not okay with this, then it's censorship, right? So if a doctor, for example, would take advantage of patients who are forced to stay in bed because they're immobilized by their sickness or their condition, and the doctor would go to that patient and start lecturing him about Jesus Christ, like he would target atheists and he would go to them. It's like, yeah, don't you feel the end is coming? Don't you think like you should convert? Don't you think like you should stop praying to God? If a doctor did that, do you not think it would be okay if the doctor got fired? Or do you think it would be like a violation of his free speech if he wasn't allowed to take advantage of his position in a hospital to start lecturing people that don't have any choice, that really can't leave the bed because they're too sick to do so? Why I find this very interesting is that a lot of people were like, well, CRT isn't being taught in school. Okay, perfect. Let's look at, I don't know, Nazism. All right? Do you need to teach Mein Kampf in school if all of the teachers would genuinely believe the ideology? Like, if all the teachers would be fervent believers of that ideology, do you not think that would affect the way they behave towards the children? Do you not think that it would affect the way they behave in their teaching methods, and that they would favor some students over others without having to teach the ideology itself, right? So that is another problem that needs to be addressed. It's a difficult question to ask, because if a teacher would be proven to be a racist, he would get fired, and rightfully so. But what if a teacher is woke? And by the way, like, wokeness also brings segregation, in case you didn't know. But it's for the good thing, because like part of the ideology they talk is like dismantling capitalism, right? It's dismantling the system, and it's also like the reason they do segregation is for a righteous cause. Unlike the racists, they do it for an evil cause, but they segregate for the good reasons. So yeah, I mean, I definitely think that they're going to win. There's a lot of money being pumped into this. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the union has like $350 million. And out of that money, they also plan to defend the teaching of CRT. So if you're a parent that wants to talk against or something like that, they can go after you. They have the funds to do it through legal means. Blacklists to make sure that the people keep their mouth shut. And it's also the fact that I genuinely think that in the future it's going to be made illegal to pull your kid away from school. And in a future video, I'll talk to you about some material, some interesting stuff that kids learn at school. Because again, like, not a lot of people can articulate what CRT is or isn't. But a lot of people can look at the material and they can go, wow, that's really fucked up, isn't it? And as you saw, like the black person in the beginning, like the individual who was talking about how they treated his kid, is not something out of the ordinary. Like, you find even people that have been to North Korea or Cuba, and they're very worried about this. And they're speaking it out on social media. There's viral videos going forward, and a lot of people don't like it. But the question is, like, who's going to win? Is it like the people that are going to have the moral fortitude to speak out against it, to talk about it, and just how convicted the teachers are going to be? Because a lot of the teachers probably don't want to do this, but they kind of have to if they don't want to get fired. So let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.